Welcome back. So, despite trying to somewhat be an author and a writer, I don't really feel like I get to read as much as I personally would like to. That's mainly on me. But one book series that has always been near and dear to my heart, and that has done an inordinate amount of influence on my own writing, is the Skulduggery Pleasant Series by Derek Landy. I first remember becoming aware of this book series around the time of the first or second book when they came out in the late 2000s. A friend of mine at school, because I was still in primary school at the time, was reading them and enjoyed them a fair bit, and then I got my hands on the first book and was just fell in love with the series ever since. So for those unaware, Skulduggery Pleasant is a dark fantasy YA author series by Irish author Derek Landy, and it follows the titular Skulduggery Pleasant, an undead detective, along with his sidekick Valkyrie Kane. And they get involved in a variety of interesting and world-ending plots, and basically they just try to save the world every other weekend, as you know, as you do. So I was essentially brought up on this book series, and it started off with basically, because I was still quite young at the time, basically all of us in the family have read them. So I read them, my brother read them, my dad even read them and enjoyed them greatly. And I think more than anything is just how fun this book series is, because it does get quite dark sometimes, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a few, moments of levity and just a good few moments of comedy as well, which are always it's always fun. So the first book, published in 2007, starts off with a young girl called Stephanie Edgley at her uncle's funeral, and surprisingly she is left with a significant part of his estate in his will, and but is also attended by a mysterious fellow wearing a mask and a frilly wig. However, in her first night in her new house, her uncle's old house, the house is broken into and she is attacked by a mysterious man threatening to do some harm, when then the masked man from earlier comes in and saves her. And it's then found out that the masked man is actually Skulduggery Pleasant, hence why he wears a mask, because he's literally a skeleton. There's always the interesting thing. There's just so much like darkly humorous things. Is that he's a detective and he's literally just a skeleton. Hence the play on skullduggery and that. And it's so interesting of a concept, and it just plays with it so well in the story. But from that, basically, Stephanie is then sucked into this magical underworld, where then she adopts the moniker of Valkyrie Kane and becomes a sort of magical crime-fighting duo along with Skulduggery, and the all sorts of wild magical hijinks they happen. So to say probably the biggest influence is the whole kind of urban fantasy thing that's going on, because it is basically set in the real world. It's written and set in Landy's home country of Ireland, and it's Ireland. I was trying to do an accent there, it was weird. But there is this secret magical underworld with all number of wild, crazy things that happen underneath, and with a dynamic magic system that I will get onto in a moment, and the whole number of wild and colourfully creative characters, but also with a healthy dose of darkness as well. I will say, when it does come to some of the violence and the graphic injury detail that goes on, and some of the gore, I mean, again, it's all written, so you can probably get away with a lot more than you can in like a movie, but it does not hold back. It genuinely, some of it is graphic as all hell. It does so if you're a little bit squeamish, maybe it's not for you, but honestly, I love this book series so much, and it's so weird having this juxtaposition of just such really quite dark, disturbing stuff that happens here and there, while also, again, like I said earlier, this wonderfully just hilarious sense of humor that is just baked into this. To say that this book series, as well as just influencing my writing, has influenced my sense of humor is a massive understatement. Just one thing I can point out that even my family and I reference to this day is, for those who've read the book, but I'll just go over it. Near the beginning of the first book, when there's the reading of the will of the uncle who's passed away, all the families crowding round to, see what cut of the estate they're going to get, and they're all, they're sort of like the kind of the selfish, evil kind of, well, not evil, but just kind of like the selfish, arrogant uncle and aunt that are off in the, that are off there kind of quite, upset to see all of the quite a significant portion of the stuff going to young Stephanie, who's I think probably about 11 or 12 years old at the time of this. But the main thing is that I think like the Gordon, the uncle, leaves them, I think, what was it, his boat and his car, I think, and it's just, there's just the constant back and forth of like, we've already got a car. Yes, we already have got a car. And like, I don't ever need a boat. I get seasick. Oh, yes, you do get seasick. And that's just a constant thing we just reference between each other and the family. And it's just genuinely, I'm not doing it justice in this video, but it is a hilarious moment. And there's just so many great moments of just sharp wit that comes from all of the characters. Skulduggery in particular, he's just, the way he's written, he's just got such this hilariously, often snarky, but not like, annoying sense of humor, and it's and the way that him and Valkyrie just sort of like bounce off each other dynamic wise, it is great. And not to mention there's also plenty of other comic relief characters in the book that just add some levity to the often quite dark and grim stuff that's going on in this novel, this book series, most of the time. But going into as well, for those who watched my past few videos of I was going over my sort of planned novel series, the Magic System. You probably will maybe see some similarities between the Magic System using this book series and the Altera series I've got planned. And so to just basically go over that, there's sort of two main disciplines of the Magic System. There's the Elementals and the Adepts. So the Elementals are the typical ones you control: earth, fire, wind, water, that kind of stuff. Whereas the Adepts have more, they have adapted to specific magic qualities. Typically the Adepts tend to be the more sort of morally grey characters and more of like the villainous ones, and the Elementals seem to be on the good side. But one thing that's good is that the lines are not, they're not firm lines and that kind of stuff. Elementals can be bad people, Adepts can be good people. For example, I'm not going to spoil anything, but one of the significant antagonists that looms in the background of a lot of these novels, great dreaded ones, is themselves an elemental, but also plenty of the members in sort of like the main cast of characters of the good guys are adepts. Like, for example, the one character, Tanith Lowe, she tends to fight with a sword, but also has this ability to kind of shift her own center of gravity and stuff to kind of sort of soften one's falls from large heights and sort of run up walls and that kind of stuff. And it's very cool stuff. Because just with like the amount of depth that goes on in these, it doesn't feel like it's overblown or sort of overly saturated. I know a lot of Magic systems tend to err on the side of simplicity because it's easier to define, but what Landy does is a very dynamic and seemingly endless pool of magical possibilities, but it makes sense and the stakes make sense fully, and it's and it just shows his skill of his ability to really make it feel like it makes sense with still holding back some of the aspects of it and that. And it's well, I guess that's how a soft magic system works. As I've grown older, I've actually I've had this funny thing, just a side note, where I actually sort of don't want sort of a film or screen adaptation of this, because as a child I was always, love books, but also love watching the movie adaptations. But with how, disappointed we can often be in screen adaptations of our favourite novels, it's actually one of the things I don't want adaptation of. Maybe that's just selfishly me. What I do like is that Derek Landy has the rights to the movie, and I think they were going to make a movie. He read the script and said it was bloody awful, so he he forced them to can it, which I really quite heavily respect. And honestly, these just work perfectly well as books as well. I'm not really sure how some of the more graphic stuff would translate to the screen if you're going to sort of equally go for the the YA audience base as well, age group wise, but doesn't matter. If they ever do make a screen adaptation of this, I do hope they do it justice, because it warrants it, genuinely. It's so dynamic in its tone while still feeling cohesive, and the characters have just so much depth and they're always so likable. Even the villains, they're just, the kind of ones you love to hate, or even then they just have just such an amazing kind of charisma that they're written with, that you can't help but just read on, and even the less character-driven characters, that makes sense. But the more kind of force of nature villains, literally they fight off against some gods in in this series. The true scale of the stakes escalate to, you know, you think it can't get any crazier, and then it does. But again, it doesn't feel contrived or ridiculous at all. I think more than anything, it's just fun, and that's what kept me engaged for as long as I did with this series. It's just so fun. So many book series or just books in general that I try to read, and I end up kind of getting stuck in DNF because I'm not necessarily having as much fun with them. But this one just keeps me engaged all the way through, and I am, you know, and I wish I could carry that, just the way, just the vibes and the atmosphere that this makes me feel. I just wish I could bring that into my own, and sort of going on with like the characters and that kind of stuff. Each of them are so distinct and memorable in their own rights. They always have these distinguishing features that you can always point to sort of recognize them. But even then, just how they're written and their character, sort of how they behave as well, is always so distinct in that kind of way. Of course, so yeah, Skulduggery himself is a literal skeleton. Stephanie's kind of, or Valkyrie, is the main sort of like POV character. We sort of live through. She's like a normal person thrust into this world, and we sort of like live through her in a way. So she's kind of like the conduit, but that doesn't mean that she's just, you know, a point of view audience insert. She has her own story and arcs and character of her own that is just so great. But as well, there's just so many just great, interesting quirks as well. Like there's one character called Ghastly who's a tailor, and one of his distinguishing features is he's just covered in scars, and he looks ghastly like the name, but he's just one of the most sort of, you know, caring and you know, lovable characters, and he's, you know, a kind-hearted one. And then of course, like I said, there's Tanith, who's sort of the who's a skilled sword fighter, and he's just got such a wonderful, great, happy-go-lucky character, despite, you know, how skillful of an assassin she is. And not to mention as well the more morally grey characters that happen throughout, and just the depth of the world as well that they build out with the hidden magic societies hidden beneath our hidden beneath our feet and behind the wall and that kind of stuff. It's so interesting as well. And even then, like sometimes when they bring out like the really quite dark stuff, like they have vampires in this one, but the way they write the vampires is depicting them is just horrific, because they're just full on, once they're in like blood hunting mood, they are just incredibly, like, they're not the small fangs, they've got this big, like, they turn into just like these skinny undead animals where they just sort of shed their skin and have these massive fangs, and they, instead of like leaving the two little pinpricks, they leave like a gash in your neck where they like suck the blood out, and it's so it's like properly like, oh god. But it's just the creativeness of that just sort of, you know, keeps you reading as well. And again, I know I went on this earlier, but I can just bring it again just to nail this home, is just, despite how dark and epic these stories are, they are so funny sometimes because of just how the characters are written, their dialogue, their interactions with one another and that. And it was, I mean, I can't do it justice right now, of course, but genuinely, if you're a fan of any sort of like dark fantasy, horror adjacent fantasy, urban fantasy, any of that kind of stuff, and you haven't read this book series, I highly recommend, because this is just, it's genuinely some of the best stuff I've read. And again, massive influence on my style and my taste. Honestly, if I could go back and read this book series for the first time all over again, absolutely would. It's, you know, every time I have reread this series, it's just been such a good fun time, and can't even really begin to put it into words, even though I've been trying to in this video. Yeah, as well as the main series, also some spin-off books as well, which you know, follow other characters as well, and they're great fun as well. It is a great book series, and it's one I hold near and dear to my heart, and will continue to for as long as I have consciousness. But yeah, anyway, thank you for watching me just gush and rant incoherently about some books. Hopefully something more normal will come back in the next video, but until then, I will see you then, and have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video.